one who's gone has ever come back, and that's why I'm writing you. Not for advice, not to get you to talk me out of going. Actually, by the time you read this, I'll already be there. I just wanted to let you know, in case I don't come back. That way you won't be wondering where I've gone. Either way, you don't have to worry about me anymore.
Heartworm by Vincent Adinolfi is a game that I've had my eye on for a long time, and so it's been great to finally see it released. The finished product, a survival horror game with a deliberately crafted retro PS1 aesthetic, is pretty much everything I'd hoped for in this release, with very little to criticise about it. It's gorgeous looking, with a great soundtrack that will make survival horror fans feel right at home, and the level and puzzle design is absolutely on point. If you're just looking for a recommendation, without any further elaboration, then mine is this. Go and play it. Go and play it now. Heartworm is a love letter to classic survival horror. And by that, I don't just mean that it has the kind of level design and mechanics that we've come to expect from the genre. The inventory management system, and even the look and feel of it, scream classic PlayStation 1 Resident Evil. As do the loading screens where you pass through doors, up or downstairs or ladders, or through different areas of wilderness. Meanwhile, the camera movement evokes the original Silent Hill in the way it tracks your movement while still framing the action in a cinematic way. And though I've not played the Fatal Frame series, the use of a camera as your main weapon, especially to try and capture ghosts whose movement is shifting and non-linear, would seem to take inspiration from those games. But these elements of homage, which could as easily be part of some purely derivative work, fit together into a broader whole which very quickly forges its own identity, not only in terms of the world it places you in and the story it tells, but also how it feels as a complete package. The nostalgia hit is there, not just in the systems and elements I've mentioned, but also in the graphical feel and even the font of the UI text, which calls back not only to classic survival horror games, but to PS1 games in general, such as Tomb Raider. However, the hit only lasts for so long, and after that the game itself needs to give you something to cling on to. And on that front, it absolutely delivers. You play this game as Sam, a young woman who is grieving for her grandfather and wrapped up in the melancholy of death. So obsessed is she with what she's lost that she seeks out an abandoned house where you're supposed to be able to communicate with the dead. And through it she proceeds into an other world made up of her own memories and anxieties, haunted by ghosts wrapped in TV static, as she tries to find the items she needs to navigate this shifting otherworld and find answers. This otherworld, reflective of the nature of both memory and grief, isn't a true facsimile of Sam's past, but a pastiche. The important locales are closer together in this spiritual place than they were in reality, and distorted by the echoes of tragedy. This is a world transformed by the grief that haunts it, with monsters born of real-world phobias, such as off-leash dogs in the park becoming fearsome hounds prowling through the wilderness. You can wander freely between night and day, or winter and not winter, as the environment suits the prevailing memories of specific locations. All of it is symbolic of the entangled knot of grief, nostalgia and homesickness. What the Welsh would call hiraeth. There's even a case to be made for the PS1 era survival horror nostalgia of the graphics and aesthetic being a metatextual reflection of this same feeling, an attempt to recapture a period of time and a feeling that we won't ever truly return to, despite the best efforts of fantastic indie developers like Vincent Adinolfi. The basic gameplay loop within this is a familiar one. You find yourself within a given location, which you must explore and solve puzzles or find key items in order to truly, fully open up. The initial area is relatively small, the aforementioned house that serves as a gateway to the beyond. From there, the other areas are larger and more open, starting, for example, with a spectral approximation of Sam's old neighbourhood, with individual houses to explore and a broader neighbourhood area to navigate between them. If you're new to survival horror, a good rule of thumb to expect in these sorts of things is that the area you're in has an exit that's pretty close to you, but it's locked, And to get what you need to open it, you'll have to open everything else up around you. You'll be doing a lot of backtracking as you do this, solving one puzzle to find a key item or element to solve another, until finally you have in your hands the key item for that final door, or have found each of the multiple elements that have to be completed to open it. In Resident Evil, for example, your first stint in the mansion is all about finding the 4 crests that grant access to the outdoor area leading to the guest house and ultimately the caves. Heartworm is no exception to this, but what keeps it fresh is that each hub has its own aesthetic and environment to explore, its own ultimate door solution, and of course enemies to navigate as you're trying to do all this. The puzzles provide a solid variety across the course of the game. Some are straightforward enough, find a key and bring it to a door, while others are more complex, with a couple in different areas that I had to let my brain stew on and return to once I'd dealt with some other areas of that hub. None of them ever felt like too much, leaving me utterly stumped long enough to bring the game to a crashing halt. Nor did it feel like everything was too easy and straightforward so that I could just sail through. The balance of the puzzles was, to me at least, just about right. The only thing that did stop me for a long time was navigation in a couple of areas. And while this is mostly on me, it does bring me to one of my few criticisms of the game, namely the map. The map was great overall, as even in an area where there were lots of doors, it did a good job of highlighting the specific amount of doors, or in some cases passageways to different map sections that you would have to deal with. But there was one specific door which was not highlighted in the downtown area, leading to the boss fight. And so because I hadn't gone down that section of the street, thinking it a dead end, I had no idea it was there. At the same time, the map's key for areas that hadn't been fully explored was a static effect rather than a separate colour, and that static effect seemed to be inconsistent in terms of where it did or didn't appear. Some entire areas showed the static effect while you were in an adjacent area. Then, when you went into the area, the effect narrowed down to specific buildings, which then didn't have the effect once you were inside them. My vision isn't the best to begin with, so I wasn't sure if my eyes were playing tricks on me. But as a result of that, and one key door not being on the map, I spent longer than I had to going in circles, believing that I'd missed something that I hadn't. Again, this criticism is a minor one, and easily fixed simply by using a clearer, more accessible map legend for unexplored areas, and double checking that the map includes everything it needs to. It didn't stop me from progressing overall, but I could certainly see how such a thing might be frustrating for some players. The positive from this, however, is that the level design overall is fantastic. The way the map unlocks as you explore it, being able to unlock doors that give you a quicker route back to where you want to be, while necessitating backtracking across areas containing enemies and having to keep track of what doors still need unlocking or puzzles still need completing, all fits perfectly within the genre and what I'm used to from it. It never felt too linear and straightforward, nor needlessly circuitous in a way that undercut the gameplay loop. I always try to explore a survival horror game in a very systematic way, and the levels of Heartworm fit in well with the methodology I've developed for myself over 30 years of playing this genre. Also, boy, did writing that sentence make me feel old. When it comes to enemies, as with any classic survival horror title, the amount of ammo you have available doesn't lend itself to taking on and killing all of them. Therefore, you have to decide which ones to avoid and which to fight, with the former presenting a continuing risk in areas where you have to backtrack. The combat itself is interesting, as your weapon is a camera, and snapping the enemies is how you defeat them. So you have to position yourself with enough time to aim, get off a couple of shots, then move out of harm's way to repeat the process. And unlike with a gun, you can't just fire off shots until they drop. These enemies move fast. The ghost enemies will phase and teleport, reacting to the damage you do, while the other enemies leap about and continually shift positions, requiring fast reaction times. With that said, the damage that the enemies do on this single difficulty doesn't really pose the most dangerous threat. If you let yourself stand still and be cornered, you're in for a tough time. But on the whole, I felt safe to just run past a whole lot of the enemies without real risk, and there were only a couple of times in combat where I felt at real risk of death. Even so, I never actually died while playing the game except for one scripted chase sequence with an enemy that insta-kills you on touch. The first death was because I took a wrong turn. Fair enough. While the second appeared to be a glitch with the enemy's hitbox, getting me even though it was on the other side of a barrier. But in actual combat, I never struggled. The boss fights, too, posed some frustrating moments due to their speed and wide hit radius, but never really felt like a true challenge. By which I mean the actual act of taking them down was straightforward enough, while for the most part the damage I took felt imposed rather than like something I could tactically do something about by playing better. With that said, the fights had an interesting design to them, particularly the deer boss and its game of hide and seek. But I was never caught short by not realising they were coming and not stocking up. The arena for the fight generally provided the health and ammo I needed, and even in the first fight, where I ran out of health and was on an orange caution, the damage wasn't enough to stop me from getting through pretty safely. Given that I often felt the damage unavoidable, this was probably for the best. But it still felt unusual that I didn't die to a single boss in my first playthrough, even where I was playing clumsily. The final boss was a great spectacle, facing off against a huge opponent who was raining down damage in a small space. A great homage to a particular era of boss design in the same way that Astrobot bosses are. But once you got into the rhythm, it was pretty straightforward to beat with no trouble. Now this isn't an argument to overtune the game and make it super hard. However, a second difficulty option where the enemies do somewhat more damage, and health kits in particular are a little more scarce, would be a cool addition for survival horror veterans. With the specific exception, I must say, of the mannequins and the office job level. That was terrifying on an existential level, and although I got through it without dying, it was possibly the first time a video game has made me feel like I need to call in sick from stress. That office is in dire need of a trade union, but the set piece there was superb. The overall experience of the game, having played the full thing in a single 8-hour session, was an extremely satisfying one. The story, once it is fully unfolded, is a melancholy exploration not only of loss and grief, but also of life, and what it means to truly live versus being held in place by the lament for what was and what could have been, while the clock of our existence ticks inexorably away. It's heartfelt and real, but in a way that interweaves with the surreality and horror of the ethereal environment fantastically. The notes complement the main narrative well, and while towards the start it felt as though they were going to fall into the modern survival horror trap of excessive exposition via artifacts, across the span of the game, this wasn't the case. A couple of diary entries were perhaps overlong, but it certainly didn't come close to other games that all but inserted entire novels into their files. Finally, despite my earlier accessibility complaint about the map, the game does have good accessibility options, such as an arachnophobia mode, which applies to one specific boss fight, and the ability to switch to more modern controls. Though I wouldn't recommend the latter, and not just because I'm an old school gamer who appreciates tank controls. Put simply, camera relative movement is only going to make things messier in a game with a camera you can't control. If this was a third person over the shoulder camera, sure, those modern controls would be a must. But with a fixed camera, or a camera out of your control, there's a comfort in up always being forward. Heartworm is a love letter and homage to the classics of my favourite genre that manages to take those elements and tell a story and build a world that is all its own. It's captivating, looks, sounds and feels great to play, and whilst giving us veterans a nostalgia hit, is also a good way to introduce someone new to survival horror to all the things we love about it. It's also proof that, as the AAA scene does its best to tear itself down, indie developers can still deliver truly fantastic works of art, made out of love for the form and its history. There's a link in the description to buy the game on Steam, and I highly recommend you do so. And once you have, or if you're watching this video having already played it, let me know your own thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. Like the video that's just popped up, which YouTube thinks you should watch next. This is a Patreon and member supported channel, So if you want to become a member and unlock custom badges and emojis, early access to my videos, and your name in the credits, then click the join button below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.